Well, everybody, let's talk about the giant water problems on the Great Lakes. The never-ending cycle of the up and down water, where the Wall Street investors and the banksters and their bar card mafia, the good old bar card mafia that run with Andrew Cuomo and Basil Sagos. And they talk about that massively complicated subject, the up and down and up and down, up and down waters on the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence Seaway, where they turn all that rain, all that excessive rain, they turn it into billions and billions of dollars. Well, reserve notes, shin plaster, that magical out of the thin air stuff that finances all the campaigns for all the Teflon Dons. Which brings me to the subject of Teflon Don. We have a criminal organization currently running the United States. Well, its criminal organization's been running the United States for, I guess since the European bankster gangsters, the Spanish, the Dutch, and the French kingdoms showed up in North America. No sooner than the European gangster banksters' boats hit the Atlantic coast, they stole everything in sight and turned it into a government cash cow. And they turned y'all into a bunch of slaves. But let's get back to Teflon Don and the magical, fantastical vanishing of so many trillions of reserve notes, it staggers the mind. The great shin plaster looting. Let's ask William Barr about the shin plaster looting of America and the up and down, up and down, up and down waters of Andrew Cuomo and Basil Sagos there on the Great Lakes. I find it quite amusing that the people whose property is being destroyed along the shoreline, whose property is being flooded and wiped out by ice damage because of the up and down waters on the Great Lakes. That whole scenario, that whole saga of property damage, that began with Isaac Kellogg's Dam on the north end of Lac du Saint-Sacrement, the famous Poop Chute River Dam there at Ticonderoga, up there at Old Weedville along Alexander Avenue in Ticonderoga, New York, where the International Power Corporation, International Power and Paper, just like the great big dam systems on the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence, the Moses Sanders Dam operates exactly the same way as dam number 230. They pond back the water, they raise the water, and then they flush it for huge amounts of campaign donations to the nation's wealthiest politicians. And I assure you that Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden and the poop packing Pete there, old Mayor Pete, the poop packer, and he's a poop packer, folks. Him and his husband. Stop and think about it. Now, I know that might seem a little disgusting to everybody, but, well, gee golly whiz, it is disgusting. It's about as complicated as the up and down, up and down, up and down water that makes gabillions of dollars for the biggest campaign contributors in the nation and, in fact, around the world. You see, money from hydroelectric generation is big business. And when it comes to ponding back water, like they have done on Lake George forever, ponding back water, where they build the water up, they let the water build up so that they can flush it and make a whole bunch of money in the process. That's to all my friends up on Lake Superior and Lake Michigan and Lake Ontario and Lake Erie, the Great Lakes. The massive property destruction on the Great Lakes and the massive property destruction along the St. Lawrence River because of the Moses Sanders Dam and the other dams. There's a few other dams too there in the water basin, the watershed, if you will, to the St. Lawrence River, which just by coincidence, Lake George is part of the St. Lawrence Seaway watershed. Isn't that fantastic? Same with the Richelieu River, the Poop Chute River, the old Lachute River there that goes into Lake Champlain. And then, of course, you got the Hudson River because of the Lake Champlain Canal, the Champlain Canal that comes up from Albany up to South Bay on Lake Champlain. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is a massively complicated story of up and down water that makes huge amounts of electricity so that the big campaign contributions can be made to people like Andrew Cuomo, who keeps Basil Sagos in a job. It's the way it is, folks. Now, to end this one up, I want to talk a little bit about Teflon Don. Teflon Don and his dust up there with Andy Cuomo over illegal aliens getting driver's licenses. I mean, there's not too much to understand there. I mean, the people are in the country illegally. They're they're illegal aliens. They're undocumented in the country, and Andy Cuomo wants to give them driver's licenses so that they can register to vote. And you know how that goes. They just want those driver's licensed illegal aliens to vote Democrat. So there you have it. That's how it works in New York State. It's as simple as the up and down water damage from Dam 230 on the Poop Chute River, and all the property damage all along Lake George, and all the slop and the poison and the toxins that are being flushed, all the sewage that's being flushed into Lake Champlain, into the Richelieu River, and then, of course, on up into the St. Lawrence River. Andrew Cuomo, Basil Sagos. We really should have a discussion about this, Chuck Schumer and Bernie Sanders, and I don't know, we can get that Stefanak, that woman Stefanak from up there in the Adirondacks, and Betty Little and Dan Steck, the legislators there from Warren County, New York. We need to talk about the flushing of all the Lake George sewage leachate from all the brownfields, all the septic systems around Lake George. Oh, and Glen Lake, too. I guess Glen Lake flows one way or another over into the Champlain Canal. The Glens Falls Feeder Canal damn sure feeds into the Champlain Canal, and then, of course, drags up all that chemicals and toxins and sewage and dumps it in Lake Champlain. In the watershed, here you go, the watershed of the Great Lakes. The watershed of the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence River. They're all connected. They call it, they call it an ecosystem. An ecosystem of huge campaign contributions to the most crooked politicians in the history of New York State and Vermont, and apparently Quebec and Toronto and Montreal, and all around the shoreline there of the Great Lakes. Folks, I'm going to leave it right there, and all the information and links that you need to understand this subject are posted right here below. And I guess the last thing I'll say to you is I suppose as long as Andy Cuomo gets his campaign contributions, the ponding back of water, the up and down water and property damage on Lake Ontario and Lake Erie and the St. Lawrence Seaway and Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Ontario, it's okay because Andrew Cuomo, he's getting his big campaign contributions. Folks, I guess we'll leave it right there, and as always, hasta la vista. God bless, and you can bet you we're coming back.